I'm going to now introduce Michael Cannizzaro and the synthetic training environment cross-functional team and Michael's key role there. And the presentation on virtual humans in the Army's flagship program for simulation modeling, the synthetic training environment. So Mike, welcome in and over to you.
Thanks, Travis, and thanks to everyone for dialing in and also for having us again. So last year we discussed a little bit of virtual humans in STE in the sense of overarching sort of concepts. This year I want to get a little bit more specific in the limited time that we do have. So on this slide, we're sort of we're talking about some of the limitations of what the STE is trying to address. So as background, currently, Army training and simulation technologies are aging. They are becoming more difficult to sustain. They are based on technologies that were developed individually as point solutions to point needs. And so in this case, they are not necessarily designed for interoperability and certainly are not always able to replicate the operational environment that we're moving into in a modern battlefield. And so on the next slide, I'll discuss a little bit of this is the architecture for the synthetic training environment, and this will become important as we move on into the presentation. But it's sort of a vocabulary lesson for us. And so the STE is broken out into these major components, and so you can think of training management tool as sort of an overarching exercise design type of capability, but also for the exercise controller to be able to monitor an exercise or a training event and then to perform an after action. And so it is not just the interface to the exercise controller or conductor, it is also a suite of tools to be able to take in authoritative data sets and to perform after actions and analytics at the end. The training simulation software is that core gaming engine or simulation engine that sort of drives the real-time component of STE, and so it is very central to the operation of the capability. And One World Terrain is something that we like to highlight as one of the critical data sources and repositories to solve some of these more legacy issues that we've had in the past, where multiple data sources come together, but maybe not so cleanly and maybe not at the same levels of fidelity. And so in this case, for terrain, One World Terrain is intending to provide a more complete and more authoritative data source for training, although the operational use cases are rolling in every day and the demand signal from the field is taking advantage of some of those modern capabilities that One World Terrain offers. Around this core are sort of input and output devices, and so these are ways that a user would interact with the core of the simulation, and these include collective training for both air and ground systems, individual soldier training interface devices, including weapon systems and other items, and then some sort of display that could be a laptop, that could also be a headset, and we also have a joint or a collaborative program with IVAS. So going to the next slide, let's think about this instead of an architectural view. Let's think about this as more of a data flow view, right? And so you can imagine that the amount of data to pull into a training environment is immense, and we are not the authoritative source for many of these data sources. In fact, we're not the authoritative source for the bulk of them. One World Terrain is an exception, but in this case, we pull you can pull from doctrine things like graphics models. We are not going to necessarily develop models for the virtual human or a tank or whatever. These are developed by other organizations, and we are beneficiaries of that work as long as they are available, discoverable, and also available as a service or easily incorporated into the environment. And then in the exercise and design control, I'll show you in the example, we're pulling these data sources in, we create the exercise, and the exercise controller has the ability to select the most appropriate data stores and then to support their scenario, and then they kick off the scenario in the exercise, and that goes into the runtime in which case the exercise will be run. The users at any scale will be able to interact with the simulation, and they indirectly interact with those data stores on the left. And the instrument, the runtime is instrumented in order to collect data throughout the length of the exercise, which could last from several minutes to several days. And then at the end, you complete your tasks, and then you run your analytics, your archiving on the data that was collected, in addition to the near-term after actions that are done. So let's take this example and make it a little bit more specific about something in the next slide for what we are prototyping here in the synthetic training environment. So in this example, and this is something that we're doing in our own lab that we have in our CFT, which is unique among CFTs. So we have access to a marksmanship trainer. It is a commercial product, and then so we would run that trainer with a user in there, and they would perform a proficiency test on a weapons exercise. We would then collect that data into a weapons performance model for that individual user. And similarly, like you've seen previous, prior in the day, there are 3D scanning technologies at various fidelities, and so we can also incorporate a 3D scan of that specific person. And then moving into the planning stage, you would do your normal exercise design and control. We would pull from authoritative data sources as we need to. We would create a soldier avatar in this case using that 3D scan. So the soldier is seeing themselves in the simulation. And then we would hybridize a weapon model based on the doctrine and the data that's coming in from those authoritative data sources, but that would be salted with the proficiencies that were demonstrated in that marksmanship trainer. So in this case, we're taking things that were collected over time, as well as things that are collected in a more near-term case here, and then we incorporate that into the next exercise. Those are then run into the runtime, and so that specific user's avatar model would be run in the runtime, and the weapon performance would be modified based on the performance of that specific person, based on that marksmanship training proficiency. And then you come back and then you perform your after action review. The avatar in the simulation, if they did not have, so in this specific example, they would be running the simulation and the training event as an avatar in this case, right? So from a laptop or some other input device that does not have a weapons component, but their weapons proficiency would reflect their actual proficiency in the marksmanship trainer. And so you perform an after action, and then through the instrumentation of the runtime, you feed that data back, and you perform your data curation over the aggregate. And this enables long-term analytics, and it enables a methodology to measure things that have previously been very difficult to measure, such as unit readiness. Readiness is sort of a soft, in some cases, a sort of a soft science in how to measure it or grade it. And so this adds a little bit of data pedigree to being able to do that. And then, of course, in the aggregate, what we're doing here for the specific example is we're not intending to make this a fieldable prototype. So this prototype is intended to identify gaps in our data methodology, perhaps in the data model itself or the storage or the curation, so that we don't store too much data, but we store the right data that would be able to feed forward into the future, because obviously at this scale, data management and storage, as well as responsiveness of being able to bring that data back into the next exercise is a little bit of a challenge. So if we go to the next slide, I'll just discuss some of the other areas that we're currently researching in our lab. So avatar scanning that was shown earlier today, and we need to do that at multiple levels of fidelity, and in some cases, time will dictate that more than others. Human performance data as a service, and so we're talking that a little bit, that sort of feeds in a little bit to another bullet on community CPT, but we need almost every data set to be available as a service. Providing hard drives or providing local stores for some of these things is just not sustainable, especially when one of the points of the synthetic training environment is to deliver it at scale and to the point of need. And so those need to be discoverable. They need to be available as a service so that we can pull them in. Big data analytics need to be done not only for individuals but also across the aggregate of the force, and for multiple uses, not just proficiencies, but also, like I said, readiness and other things that have become difficult to directly measure. And then so I think this really sort of gets at some of the areas that we're prototyping, and certainly we are not the authoritative source of a lot of these things, again, but we are responsible and in some cases required and pushed to become sort of the hub for where a lot of these technologies come in together. So if we go to just the next slide, we're sort of wrapping up here. So where do we do this? So the CFT, like I said, is unique in that we have a lab. We're the only CFT with a dedicated lab for us. And so we do this here in Orlando, and we have a few tenets for what we do. Assessing progress of the acquisitions is one of them. But here, what I discussed today is sort of this prototyping of complex research topics. And so we encourage others to come in and show and integrate. And we have a venue for that. And so that venue is unique, and we do things to reduce risk for the PEO and our other partners because we can do things in a rapid way, and we can do things in a fashion that allows us to fail quickly, find the faults, and then regroup, and then feed those lessons up to the PEO and our acquisition partners. And then we also, in general, have reached back and outreach to S&T, academia, and industry. And then to a lesser extent, demonstrations. Of course, there's always the visitors that come in to see what we do. So if you go to the next slide, I think this is my closer here. So we encourage participation, and the best way to do that is to go to our website and submit to our portal, and there is a mechanism there to provide a white paper or other documentation on products or services or things that you think are useful. The lab is well equipped both in terms of facilities and staff to be able to integrate things. And if there are items of interest regarding virtual humans or anything in the modernization of the STE and the training community in general, we encourage participation and outreach. So I tried to run through that pretty quick, and so I don't know if we have time for questions, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, that was excellent. One question was related to, and I'm glad you brought it up, the TIF. And in general, the Tech Grove and all the work that you're doing at the TIF. What's the best way for individuals, organizations to get involved in the TIF, to come see what you're doing, to make recommendations of how to participate inside the TIF?
Sure. So I think the best way is to go through that portal. Certainly feel free to contact me directly, but I would for our own sort of workflow, we do recommend and encourage participation on the website so that we can archive that information, and then it's searchable to others as people come and go, or as people are doing market research for a different topic, for example. And it should be noted that the STE-CFT doesn't necessarily have like a contractual budget or anything like that, so we would not necessarily be able to have a contractual relationship necessarily, although our industry or our government partners in S&T and in the PEO do have that mechanism. But we do have ways to assess. We're trying to provide a venue, right? The TIF is a venue for people to be involved in the modernization of training, so that it doesn't have to be a prohibitively expensive thing to get involved into. If you have a technology but you don't want to create the ecosystem in which to demonstrate it, we can be that ecosystem and we can be that venue. So we would provide the space, the physical space. We would provide the subject matter experts to perform the integration. And if all you have is a component technology, that's great. We can work on integrating it, and we can do it as a partnership. And so the details of how that's specifically done will vary on case-by-case basis, but certainly submitting a white paper or a slide deck or something to that portal is probably the best first step.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that, and thanks for walking through the slides quickly. Quickly touch base on the relationship with STTC there in Orlando, and how do they support STE?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, the CFTs were sort of designed from the start to be a focal point for sort of that three-pronged process where you have a requirements developer and then you have an S&T developer that's sort of looking at those far-reaching technology gaps, and then you have a PEO who's acquiring a system that's mature and that is integrated. And so STTC is the prime organization that has a portfolio dedicated to STE for science and technology research. And so their 6.2 and 6.3 project lines are mostly aligned to STE technology gaps. They have other customers as well, but we are one of their largest. And so STTC has the expertise and also the history and the experience to invest in Army-specific gaps, right? So we're not looking to perform investments on things that we know commercial industry or someone else in the DoD or the PEO can buy off the shelf, right? So we are looking for technology and research gaps that are specific to an Army problem that we are uniquely postured, and STTC is uniquely postured to invest in because no one else will, right? There's just no other commercial application for that technology or that body of work, and so that's really the role that they fill for us. And so they are one part of an important ecosystem, but they are a critical part.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate your information. We look forward to remaining engaged, and as you know, the world opens up a little bit more, spending more time at the TIFF and engaging with you. So thank you. Appreciate your time and all the work that everyone at the STE is doing.